Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give 1 minute while everyone jumps on. Welcome to today's webinar. So my name is Nicole. I'm the dietitian at Vital Choice Health Store, and I'll be your presenter tonight when we talk about pushing back against aging, the impact of stress. So this is a continuation in our series that we've been doing all summer long on just different ways and different things that impact aging, both physically, but also internally. What's aging our cells, what's increasing our risk for chronic diseases, and so on. So tonight we're going to talk about the impact of aging on, or the impact of stress on aging. Before we start, I just want to point out also just some features of Zoom. So if you're not used to Zoom, there is a chat feature and a Q&A feature. You can use either of those to ask questions. I cannot see you, and unfortunately, I cannot hear you. So I would appreciate it if you ask questions. I love to have kind of a back and forth. If anyone has something they thought of or something they really want to know, feel free to just write that in the chat or the Q&A box. And then if I don't get to it during the presentation, I should have some time right after to do that as well. All right, so let's get going. Let's talk about stress and how it impacts aging. I always like to start by describing what is aging. So aging is the impact of the accumulation of a wide variety of molecular and cellular damage over time. I love this image because when you think about when you first cut an apple versus what happens to it if you cut it and leave it sitting out. It oxidizes, it turns brown, it doesn't smell as good, doesn't taste as good. There's definitely an impact that happens very quickly. The same thing happens to us, but it happens more slowly over time. We have a decrease in physical capacity. We certainly have a decrease in mental capacity, and we have an increased and growing risk for disease. So we cannot stop aging, unfortunately. We can slow it down. And what the goal is not to live forever, but it's to increase our quality of life and help so that we're living and we're aging well and we're still feeling good and we're still able to move and do all these things that we want to do. And it doesn't hurt to look our best as well. So there are many things that accelerate the aging process. So we've talked about high blood sugar, obesity, poor diet. Of course, as a dietitian, I will be talking about diet at all of these because it really impacts our health and increases and accelerates aging in different ways. Inflammation, certain toxins we're exposed to, poor sleep, and tonight's topic, which is going to be stress. Let's go through some stress statistics. About 8 in 10 Americans say they encounter stress in their daily lives. Almost all of us, of course, and I think that statistic was put out a few years ago. I would be willing to bet that it's close to 100% of people these days because things are so challenging. Times are really rough right now for people. Lives have been kind of uprooted. We're quarantined, things are changing, there's different rules, and it's very stressful to have those kinds of changes in our daily lives. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States, affecting about 40 million adults. 72% of people who have daily stress and anxiety say that it interferes with their lives, into their lives at least somewhat. Stress affects us, and we're going to get into that effect and what really happens when we're stressed. What is stress? I keep saying the word, but let's define it. So stress is a normal reaction. We need it. We'll talk about why we need it in a little bit. But it's a normal reaction the body has whenever changes occur. It's our response to changes both physically, mentally, and emotionally. So it really is something that, mind, body, and soul, stress affects every single part of us. There are different types of stress, and that's something that I don't think we talk about or think about as much as maybe we should. But we can experience stress for both negative and positive events. So an example of distress, which are your crisis, your negative events. So injury, having negative feelings, having money problems, going through a divorce, work difficulties, a death in the family. Those are, of course, things that are, distressing to us. But eustress is a reaction, a type of stress to pleasing events. So think about a marriage proposal, a promotion, a new baby, going on vacation, and kind of you're excited, but it's that like stress kind of excited, having new friends, someone in the family graduating, all those kind of celebratory moments are a type of stressful situation, though it's a positive type of stress. We can't control having stress in our lives. We are all going to have stress. What we can control is our reaction, both on an emotional level and a physiological level. I always like to think of a rubber band. And, when you think about a rubber band, you stretch it and it bounces back. And then you stretch it and it bounces back. And that should be our response to stress. We get pulled a little bit, but we can go right back to normal. Unfortunately, because of kind of the way we live and all of the stress, it compounds and it's a lot more than we can take. So when you think of that same rubber band, it's like being stretched and then stretched a little more and then stretched, and then what happens? The rubber band eventually breaks. So we need to make sure not that we take away the stress. I don't have those magical abilities. I don't have a pill that can do that. But what we can do is things that will increase our resilience to stress, help us manage different types of stress, and really just gives us a better way of living. And it also slows down the aging process because, as we'll find out, stress is definitely something that accelerates aging. Before we can talk about what we can do about stress, I want to look a little bit deeper and just get into what happens in the body when we encounter stress. The adrenal glands are these little glands that sit on top of the kidneys. They're right back in the back. We've got our adrenal glands. So any gland is responsible for putting out hormones. And in this case, the adrenal glands put out stress hormones. So cortisol, which is what I think most of us think of when we talk about stress hormones. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. DHEA, that's one of the most abundant hormones in the body. It's a precursor to estrogen, testosterone. It balances some of the negative effects of cortisol. When we have really high cortisol levels for long periods of time, it starts to tap into our DHEA. So it uses it up, and it's a really important hormone. Then we have epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those are like our fight or flight response to emergencies. And that's really the reason, one of the main reasons we have adrenal glands, because you might be thinking, like, why do we even have things that are responses to stress? Well, we need them. When we were, our ancestors, I guess, are foraging in the forest and they're looking for nuts and seeds, and then all of a sudden there's a bear, they've got the necessary equipment. They've got all of a sudden all this energy that they can fight or flight. We're not foraging anymore. We're not hunting and gathering. But if you're exhausted and you've worked all day and you're really tired and you're laying in bed and you can barely keep your eyes open, but you hear the smoke detector go off, or, a phone rings and there's some sort of emergency, all of a sudden you're awake again, right? And that's the importance. That is the role that the adrenal glands play, and why we have them is so that we have that energy. We have that necessary kind of feeling to where we can respond to any sort of change or danger or, extreme positive or negative type of situation. I always think of casinos as being like this place of both extreme like eustress and then also distress, because it's like you're either winning money and you're like really excited about it and it's like good stress, or then you're losing money and that's distress. So it just made me laugh because I was thinking about casinos and just people in there, and it's like one extreme or the other. And unfortunately, a lot of us, independent of going to a casino, are still living in some of those extremes. And so we've got to support these adrenal glands and help them so that they're not imbalanced. There are some very obvious signs of imbalanced cortisol. Typically, the first thing that happens if your adrenals are imbalanced and you're overproducing cortisol, that means you're dealing with stress pretty much all the time, and it's causing this constant release of cortisol. Insomnia is a big one, or this like tired but wired feeling where you're exhausted, you're tired, but you can't go to sleep. Your mind's still going, and you're laying in bed going, why, oh my gosh, now it's 2 a.m., now it's 3 a.m., and I can't go to sleep. Or you fall asleep initially, and then you wake up, and then your mind's going, and you're thinking about all these things you have to do. That's certainly a high cortisol type of situation. Cortisol does lead to belly fat. It causes a storage of fat, especially around the midsection, in response to crisis. It's saying, like, hold on to all of this fat, you're going to need it. And again, we're not really using that up then. We're not running and being overly active to work that off, so it just gets stored as fat. It can also lead to bone loss. Of course, those normal, like, anxious feelings, and you probably either are someone or know someone that's really, like, up all the time, and they're kind of like, it's hard for you to even have a conversation because they're interrupting and their thoughts are going. You can even see how quickly their thoughts are going. That's a person that's got probably really high cortisol, and eventually the adrenals can only work hard, at that amount, put out all those hormones for so long before they burn out. And then it becomes a low cortisol situation. And that's the opposite. It's very chronic fatigue, low energy. These are the people that have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. You should have a pretty rapid rise in cortisol first thing in the morning. That gives you that energy to kind of get awake, get going. And then throughout the rest of the day, it kind of starts to taper off. And you can see on this chart that green line in the middle is a normal kind of cortisol peak where it goes up, and then, around 9 a.m. and starting into the afternoon, we start to decrease, and it tapers off, by 10, 11 at night. If someone is not getting that spike in the morning, it's really hard to get out of bed. It's hard to have the energy to even do things to help yourself. You usually have some strong food cravings. Those could be salt or sugar. You don't tolerate exercise very well. Recovery is low. Your immune response is very low. And that's a very serious thing, especially these days, is not to have a peak immune system. Stress can really wreak havoc on the immune system. So we want our cortisol to be balanced, but unfortunately, every time we deal with stress, or every time we have stress, I should say, it does something internally to us. And this is important because there are many people that I talk to that say, like, oh, I'm not stressed, because they think of stress as a person, like I described before, that like feels stressed. Like I have all this stress, I'm definitely stressed out. You don't have to necessarily feel stressed to have an issue with stress, for stress to be wreaking havoc internally on things like your cortisol levels and the adrenal glands. If we are dealing with chronic stress, if we are exposed to chronic stress and we do not have the tools to manage it well, it unfortunately can lead to some serious things like hypertension and cardiovascular disease. So having a lot of stress can actually cause inflammation in the heart and the blood vessels. And that's, contributing to the number one killers, which heart disease and stroke are there. Gastrointestinal and immune dysregulation. So I talked about how stress can really suppress the immune system. It could also cause a lot of GI issues. And if you are someone that has any sort of like IBS or gastrointestinal issue, there probably has been a conversation about stress and what kind of came first. You could have GI issues, and then that stresses you out more, and then the more stress causes more GI issues. So that you get into this vicious cycle that's really hard to get out of. Chronic stress can actually contribute to diabetes and metabolic syndrome, which is this combination of things like high cholesterol and being overweight and having a lot of weight in the midsection and having insulin resistance or diabetes, which is an issue with having too much blood sugar in the blood. So your cells are not getting the energy and the fuel that they need, which is where the sugar needs to get to. And even just short bursts of increased cortisol can increase blood pressure and can increase blood sugar. So some of my clients that have issues with blood sugar or blood pressure that's not responding to other things, or that they don't want to try to take a medication for, we look at stress levels, and you don't necessarily think that that's the place to look, but for many people, that can be a huge contributing factor. Long-term stress can really affect mood for people. It can cause a lot of depression, anxiousness, and there's a point where it's like if you have a stressful situation, if there's a death in the family or something, you experience stress, of course, but you should be like that rubber band where then eventually you're able to kind of bounce back. And with someone that's chronically stressed, that leads to a depression situation, they can't get back to normal. It just kind of continues. Lots of fatigue, lots of issues with sleep, pain. Stress can actually increase pain, or at least the feelings of pain. So those that have chronic stress often experience more persistent and higher levels of pain. And then, of course, cognitive decline, which is something that I talked about at another one of the series seminars when I talked about cognitive brain aging. Stress can actually shrink the brain. It shrinks the prefrontal cortex, which is where we have concentration and judgment and decision making. It can also decrease the amount of new brain cells that are created. So we know that when we didn't know this like 20 years ago, but now we know that we are constantly creating new healthy brain cells. That's a great thing. We want to encourage that. We want more of that. Something like stress really curbs that process, and that's not a good thing. And that's why we're finding those that have cognitive issues, whether it's like short-term memory issues or it's something more severe like dementia and Alzheimer's disease, it could be a stress issue. And managing that can certainly slow down the pathway, the trajectory towards something like dementia, or for some people, managing the stress on its own can give them their cognitive health back. And if you're really stressed, I don't know about you, but I definitely forget things more. I am more likely to do things like lock my keys in the car, or something like that. I forgot something when you're really stressed. So think about what happens when that goes on months and years. Let's talk about how stress impacts aging. So stress can actually speed up the aging of our cells. It increases inflammation. Inflammation, we know, is related to over 80% of diseases. So things like osteoporosis, arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, cancers, like these are all things that are going to age us and are diseases of those that are aging. Our skin also ages as a result of stress. And you know that you've seen someone that has just experienced a death in the family, a divorce, a chronic issue. And when you look at that person, you can visibly see on their face either new wrinkles or their skin just looks fatigued. You could really tell, on a person's skin. And the longer someone is stressed, the more accelerated that aging is, and typically the more wrinkles that they will have. There are certainly other things that contribute to wrinkles, sun exposure, smoking, toxin, there's a lot of other things, but certainly stress can impact this. It also shortens something called telomere length. And telomeres are this protective casing that is on each strand of DNA. And so every time a cell divides or gets, it kind of like shortens the telomere a bit. Every time it divides, every time it's used, when a telomere is too diminished, usually the cell dies, or it starts to be pro-inflammatory, which is not what we want, because I just talked about why inflammation is so bad. So we want to keep our telomeres as long as possible. If we knew how to keep them long and keep our cells from dying, we probably would not, that's like the fountain of youth. We can't go to that extent, but certainly managing stress is a way to help prolong that telomere length and actually support healthy aging and slow down kind of this physical aging process. So what can we do? There are many, many things. The good news is I talked about how destructive stress is, but let's talk about what we can do about it. So one thing we can do, and this might be a newer kind of thing for many people, is to talk about this concept of heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is this measure of the difference, the variation in time between each heartbeat, and it's traced back to our autonomic nervous system. So this whole sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, it regulates our systems in the body, our heart rate, our blood pressure, breathing, digestion. All of these things we know are affected during times of stress. So we want to possibly use heart rate variability as a method of measuring your resilience or your response to stress. So it's a really cool tool that you can use, when your heart rate variability changes, you want it to kind of, when you do things like become more mindful, and when you use meditation, when you do good sleep and exercise, your heart rate variability can change. And because you're measuring it, you're able to see those changes. And this is just on the screen, just one example of how it can look when you're seeing this frustration. And it almost like to look at it makes you feel frustrated, versus this shift to appreciation, this kind of, more relaxed up and down. That is something that we want to get to. And by measuring it, you're able to then see where you're at in the process. There are different tools that you can use to measure heart rate variability. One that I have experienced with clients using is something called Heart Math, which is a little device that actually goes on your ear, and it connects to usually an app on your phone. And it can show you throughout the day when you're in, depending on the app you use, it kind of shows you when you're out of range, whether it's through colors, and it'll be red when you're kind of in that frustrated zone, or it turns green when you're in a better zone. But doing that, wearing it even just like 20 minutes a day, it gives you this coherence and has been shown to reduce and prevent negative effects of stress, overwhelming, trouble with focus, fatigue, exhaustion, sleep disruptions, anxiety, and burnout. So that's just something I wanted to mention, because whenever I talk about stress, this doesn't always come up for people, and they maybe haven't heard about it before, but it's such an important thing to know about and to look into, especially if you're someone that feels like, oh my gosh, I need to be more in tune to how I am dealing with stress, and really how is this impacting me. And then once you know that, there are things you can do while you're wearing the device to kind of help to manage that. One of my favorite things to do to reduce stress is breathing, and it's free, and you can do it everywhere. So it's like we don't have an excuse to not do it, but it was pretty life-changing for me to really start focusing on my breathing. Meditation is wonderful. There are many apps out there that can take you through guided meditation. For me personally, the second someone was trying to talk me through meditation, it just didn't work. It was not working for me. So the deep breathing thing was something that for me, I did better with, and you are an individual, so you can kind of experiment with both. But I just like people, do it right now. Let's just kind of put one hand on our belly and take a deep breath. You should feel in your belly, it expands. And many of us are shallow breathers. And by focusing on this belly breathing, or whatever you want to call it, really can help slow things down and stop that kind of response to stress, because you're slowing down. Some of these breathing techniques are counting, so then your mind is redirected. So if you were thinking of things negatively before, it allows you to slow down and kind of redirect, so you're not in that pattern of more negative thoughts. They make you feel like when you breathe deeply, it makes your body just have this reaction where all of a sudden it starts to reduce tension. It makes you feel like you're relaxed. So put one hand on your stomach and let's just try to take 3 deep breaths. So you're going to breathe in. You should feel that stomach expanding, and then breathe out completely all the way. And then repeat it in. And one more time, inhale and exhale. And even just doing that, you know, you should have had a reaction where it's kind of like, oh, okay, like you feel better immediately. There are some more advanced techniques. One of my favorite, it's an advanced technique, I say loosely because it's pretty easy. I have children doing it, but you may not have heard about it, but it's called box breathing. Basically, you pick a number. Most people start with the number 4 or 5, and you inhale for a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and then you hold that exhale out for a count of 4. So that's why they call it box breathing, because it creates like a square where you inhale, hold it, exhale, and hold it out for the same number. The higher the number, usually the better, but just to start it like 4 or 5. Do that a few times in a row. It is amazing how you will feel and the benefit that you can calm and de-stress and just kind of slow things down and lower stress in the body and send that signal to the brain to really calm. It's immediate. It's something that I try to do every night. I try to do it during the day if I'm feeling stressed. Sometimes we're working at a pace where it's like you even feel out of breath, and it's like those are my signals to like, okay, you got to breathe deeper. You've got to, make sure you're breathing into your belly. One of my other favorite techniques is called 4-7-8. This was developed by Dr. Andrew Weil. He started the Center for Integrative Medicine in Arizona. He's amazing. And this one, you inhale for 4, hold it for 7, and exhale for 8. You can speed it up if you have trouble holding your breath. You can speed up the counting, but that ratio of 4, 7, 8, that's what's important. And you want to try to do that like 4 times in a row. So you inhale for 4, hold it for 7, and then exhale for a count of 8. And then repeat that a few times. So doing that, like I said, this is something that we all should be doing. We should be taught this at a young age, just as a coping mechanism, a way to de-stress, something to do when we're anxious, and just a life, one of those life techniques that can really give us a lot of support for dealing with stress. So I encourage everyone to do that. There are YouTube videos that will take you through box breathing or 4-7-8. So if you need some more guidance, you can certainly look those up, and that can help you. And I really encourage everyone to try that. It's one of the easiest things that you can do. Another thing you can do is keep a gratitude journal. So this is where it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go out and get some, amazing looking journal. It could be a piece of paper. You're writing down 2 or 3 positive things that happened in a day or something you're thankful for. And you can start really small, like we had nice weather, or I saw a really pretty flower, or I got enough sleep last night, like I feel really rested today. It could be anything. I'm thankful, my family member is healthy, whatever it is, write it down. The writing down helps to allow more positive. I don't know about you, if you've watched the news, if you have watched movies, if you listen to people talk, it's like negative, negative, negative. I forgot the statistics that they said, how many negative news stories to positive news stories whenever you read or are watching the news. But it's incredible how much negativity we're bombarded with. So having this tool to where you can actually shift to positive, and then it allows you to reflect. So I started doing gratitude journaling years ago, and it was wonderful to do. And what I didn't realize is that, oh my gosh, it's even better to go back and read some of the things that I had written down that were really like positive, happy moments. A lot of it has to do with my kids and stuff that they did that I had forgotten about, and just moments and things that were said. And it's a great thing. Again, nothing that takes a tremendous amount of effort. You can write one thing down, you can do it on your phone, you can keep it next to your bed, whatever is easiest for you. But just to really allow more positive thinking and shifting that mindset is so powerful. We also want to look at, of course, diet, exercise, nutrition. These are all really important things that can further support stress management. So exercise increases your overall health, of course. You know, if we could bottle up the benefits of exercise and sell it in a pill, it would be, you know, I'd be the richest person ever, because it just, there are so many benefits to exercise. It's good for the brain, it's good for the heart, it helps support good weight, it helps with managing blood sugar, but it also is a powerful way to burn off stress and heal the mind. It kind of burns off these stress chemicals. There are studies that look at exercise being better or equal to some of the antidepressants out there, like Prozac for treating depression. When we exert ourselves physically, we also build up a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, and this promotes the growth of new neurons, especially in like the memory regions of the brain. So any sort of movement that you can do, try to do it, and then do it at a higher level to where you feel like you're exerting yourself. So, for example, if you're just going for a walk or walking the dog, next time you do it, can you speed up the pace to where it feels uncomfortable to carry out a conversation? If you have bad knees, can you sit in a chair and do arm movements at a faster pace to kind of get your heart rate up a little bit? You're sweating a little, you're out of breath. Those are the best kind of like exercises that you can do when we're talking about stress management, is getting to a place where you feel like you're exerting yourself, your heart rate is up. So it's beyond just like walking is amazing. You can do deep breathing on a slow-paced walk, but also try to have moments where you're exerting yourself a little bit more, because that's going to be a really positive thing, especially if you're really stressed. And it can be hard to start that. I know, like it's that cycle of I'm telling you to move more, but if you're so exhausted because you're stressed, it's hard to get there. So just make a small goal. It doesn't have to be a big one. Just choose something that is small and a few minutes, and that could be a good jumping off point. Good nutrition, I mean, I could talk for hours about that, but there are things like sugar and processed foods which are suppressing the immune system, and they also are wreaking havoc on aging. And when we are stressed, we tend to crave more of those foods, unfortunately. So it's a little bit of an uphill battle to fight against it. But I always encourage people to make sure you have enough of the good foods around. You know, have a lot of cut up vegetables, have some berries, have nuts and seeds, so that when you feel like snacking, when you're feeling that stress, you have something that's at least going to be really good for feeding your gut and feeding your brain. So good nutrition is really an important thing to manage, especially when we are stressed, because again, it's another one of those things that impacts everything. You don't have to be perfect, but pay attention to how much of your day and how much of your week is spent eating nutritionally, eating healthful foods, because I can't tell you the amount of clients I have that come in and they say, I eat pretty good. And I will say to them, do you feel pretty good? Do you want to feel better? What if you could feel great? You know, what if you could have even more energy? What if you could get sick even less? What if your brain felt like it was sharper? That's like the power that foods can have on a person, and you don't always realize it until you eliminate some of those negative foods. So the first thing you want to do is look at your day, and you could even write down your foods that you're eating. Highlight or cross out or circle anytime you had something that was a processed or sugary food. So food that came in a package, whether it was cereal or it was something with multiple ingredients, a frozen meal, a goodie, of course, a chip, a pretzel, those kinds of things, and see, am I eating enough then of one ingredient foods, of nuts and seeds, of avocados and olive oil and wild fish and berries and all of these really nutritious foods to balance that out. If you're finding that you're not eating as many of those one ingredient whole foods, then that may be a place to start. That may be where you can look at and see the shift. Oh, instead of having that high sugar yogurt or smoothie, I'm just going to have some almonds and some blueberries and, you know, have that, or I'm going to have a protein shake that doesn't have a ton of sugar in it, or I'm going to have some roasted vegetables or some raw veggies with hummus or guacamole or something like that, that you can really nourish and support your adrenal glands and your whole body. You can also consider, of course, a supplement, and supplements are designed not to replace all of those other things that I talked about. You cannot supplement your way out of a bad diet, but you can add supplements in addition to some things that you're already doing. One great place to start would be to do either a multivitamin that's got a good amount of B vitamins, or do something like this Bluebonnet Stress B complex. B vitamins are amazing for supporting stress. B12 helps with energy. Pantothenic acid, which is B5, gets used up a lot and is important in making some important hormones for the adrenals and supporting those. So a B complex is a nice place to start, because you're probably pretty depleted on B vitamins if you're someone that is dealing with chronic stress. B vitamins do a number of other things as well. So either do a B complex or do something like, I like a multi like Pure Encapsulations 1, ONE. It's a 1 a day, and it has high amounts of B vitamins in active forms. So B12 is methylcobalamin rather than cyanocobalamin. So there are certain forms of vitamins that are more active than others and that are better used. So that's a great thing, because it's like you can kill two birds with one stone. It's a multi, but it's higher in B vitamins, so you don't have to take a separate B complex. Many 1 a day vitamins don't have enough B vitamins in them, so you have to often take an extra support formula. So I like the Stress B. It's got some additional stress support in there on top of the B complex, but that's a great just foundational thing to start with. Don't take your B vitamins at night, because often they can give energy, not like a caffeine energy, but many people feel better after they take them. So I suggest taking them with like breakfast or possibly lunch. The opposite of B vitamins, kind of, would be a mineral like magnesium. Magnesium is incredible. We tend to be very deficient in magnesium just as a country. It's just not something that we get enough of. So I usually suggest taking magnesium, especially if you're someone that gets headaches or tight and tense muscles, because magnesium is both physically and emotionally calming. So it makes you feel, if you're feeling anxious or stressed, it makes you feel calmer, but it also kind of helps to ease tension in the muscles. And it's wonderful to take in the evening. There are many different types of magnesium out there. The one on the screen, this Natural Vitality Calm, is a powder that you mix as a drink. And they make a ton of different flavors, and many people really like that because you can change the amount that you're taking. So you can get, you know, if you're someone more sensitive, you can take 100 milligrams. If you're someone that needs more, you can take 300 milligrams or whatever it, you know, whatever you figured it out to be. They do make gummies. I'm usually not a fan of gummies, but if it's the only way you can get something like that in, that's another option. Magnesium just tends to be a big pill. So for someone that has trouble swallowing, it's nice to have these other options like a powder or even a gummy that are still high potency that will do the job. One just thing to be aware of with magnesium is it can also be calming to the bowels. So if you're someone who draws water in as well, so if you're sensitive and you take too much magnesium, it could have a laxative effect. So to start, I usually start people around 100 milligrams, and then you can go up. Many people take between 200 and 400 milligrams as a magnesium dose. If you are sensitive to that, or you tend to be someone that has maybe looser stools in general, you can do a form called magnesium L-threonate or magnesium glycinate. And those are two forms, the first one actually being one of the best forms for the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and actually increases brain levels of magnesium. So that's magnesium L-threonate. And the second is magnesium glycinate, which is just a form that most people tolerate really well. So lots of options. That's why I love a store like Vital Choice, because you've got a well-educated staff that can take you through, you know, the 4 shelves of different magnesiums and really figure out what the best one for you would be. But magnesium is wonderful. There is probably none or super teeny tiny amounts if you're taking a multi. So many people think they're getting magnesium in a multivitamin, but because of how big the mineral is, they just can't fit it. So think about adding that in. A great time to take magnesium would be in the evening if you have trouble sleeping, if you have trouble calming your mind down, if you get leg cramps at night. Magnesium can be a great one to take. Then there are lots and lots of botanicals and herbals that can really support stress. My personal favorite, I have taken this supplement for, oh my gosh, I think probably at least 12 years at this point. It's the MegaFood Adrenal Strength. It's the one on the lower right-hand side of your screen. MegaFood is a whole food company. They are herbicide, pesticide free. They make things in a very easy to digest way. And I am someone that is very sensitive to things. So I tend to gravitate more towards things that are balancing. Adrenal Strength has an herb called ashwagandha and holy basil. Those are 2 herbs that are known as adaptogens. It also has a third called rhodiola in it. So adaptogenic herbs are herbs that actually increase your resilience to stress. So anytime you see the word adaptogen or adaptogenic, you'll know that that is something that's going to have a positive impact on stress and be really, really healthy for helping you deal with it. What I liked about it, and this is going to sound odd, it didn't work right away. I didn't feel it right away. And for me, I'm saying I like that because I like a more balanced effect. I don't want something that's going to make me feel so calm and sleepy. I didn't need that. What I needed was support to get me through stressful times. And I've just found that those herbs are so supportive and nourishing that I've gone on and off of it. There are times when I don't feel like I need it as much because I've done a decent job with my breathing and exercise and nutrition. But for most people, it's one of those things that a couple weeks, it will start to kick in. I felt like for me, I slept better. I had more energy during the day. I was a person that would get sick all the time, and I felt like this is ridiculous. I'm a healthy person. I take care of myself. But the stress, I wasn't responding well to stress. That was really causing a big suppression of my immune system. So Adrenal Strength actually was one of my favorite things to take for my immune system. And it's got some vitamin C in there, some pantothenic acid. It's got a lot of other support. I believe schizandra and some medicinal mushroom are in there as well. So it's a great product. I encourage anyone that feels like they've got a pretty big burden or they've been dealing with stress a long time, and even for those that don't necessarily feel the stress. If you're someone that feels stress and you want to calm, GABA Soothe, which is by Jara, which is on the screen, that's an excellent product because it combines ashwagandha, which is one of those adaptogenic herbs, so you get like that long-term support, with things that act faster. So GABA and theanine help increase kind of like the positive brainwaves and help to make you feel calmer without making you feel sleepy. So that's a great one whenever someone feels really stressed, or maybe they don't want to be on a medication or don't want to, go on something for anxiousness. They'll do GABA Soothe, and that's usually a pretty successful product because it has that long-term support and it has that theanine and GABA, which are more immediate in helping you to feel calmer, but not unfocused. So that's GABA Soothe. Hemp Fusion, which is one of our CBD companies. CBD is cannabidiol that is a part of hemp that helps with inflammation, helps with pain, helps with calming. And a lot of people that come in for it will take it for stress. So this particular one I have on the screen is a combination of CBD and that adaptogenic herb ashwagandha. So it's a nice little combination as well. And, you know, everyone responds in a little different way to CBD, but usually it's a very positive reaction, and it is not one that is going to make you feel overly like sleepy or anything like that. So that's a great product as well. And then the one on the top right, I'm really excited about because it's going to be a brand new product. It's by a company for the biome, which was started by Paul Schulich, who was the founder of New Chapter. And he's an amazing, amazing human being, really cares about the ingredients that are in there. This is a combination of all organic herbals. So it's chamomile, passion flower, calendula, hibiscus, there's elderflower, saffron. It's a product that I'm really excited to try because it's designed to be made like a tea where it's like a hot water extraction. There's no sugar, there's no fillers. They do that so that it comes into contact with the mouth for very fast absorption. You don't have to wait for it to get in the system and digest and all of that stuff. And really support, their whole line is supporting the diversity of the microbiome, which is all those good probiotics and good flora that we want to feed into. So I'm really excited about that. There is such a huge connection between the gut and the brain. And this is like the perfect product to kind of feed into that. I'm assuming it's going to be really great for those that feel either unfocused or that feel really kind of on edge or stressed out. But really, there aren't many people that couldn't benefit from any of these kinds of botanicals. It just depends on what you're experiencing and, what your real need is. So I encourage you to kind of come into the store and we can help you work through that and see what product is right for you, because everyone's different. So that is the conclusion of my presentation here. I am very happy to take questions if anyone has questions. You can either enter those into the chat box or use the Q&A feature. You can remain anonymous that way. So anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those now. Seelan, where can we get the device for heart rate variability? So I talked about a company called HeartMath, and I believe it's heartmath.com is where you can order one of those devices that can help to measure heart rate variability, and you can really see what is my reaction to stress, how am I doing throughout the day. You can wear it frequently in the beginning and kind of just get in tune. It'll show you like really quickly, oh, I'm in the red zone, or okay, now I'm in the green, and just makes you more mindful and in tune with that. So it's worth checking out. I'm sure there are other devices too, but that's just one that I've had many people, many friends as well, work with, and so I think it's a cool thing to check out. Another question about lemon balm and thyroid. So lemon balm is an herb that you may find in some of the stress products, and it is calming. There is some research suggesting that it does impact the thyroid. So if you're someone that has low thyroid, lemon balm can further suppress that. So it's actually used for people with overactive thyroid, but should not probably be taken if you're on a thyroid medication or for low thyroid, or you're feeling like you have low thyroid. Herbs like ashwagandha and holy basil, to my knowledge, do not have an impact on thyroid. So those would be a safer route to go as far as using those for stress without impacting the thyroid. In fact, Many people that have thyroid issues also have adrenal issues. I've read up to about 80%. So if you're someone that's on a thyroid medication, because that's a gland and the adrenals are the gland and they really work closely together, it's not a bad thought to do something to support the adrenals, whether it's deep breathing or it's taking an herbal like something like the Adrenal Strength, which does not have lemon balm in it. Any other questions? What form of magnesium did you say is good for the brain? So magnesium L-threonate also goes by like patented forms called Neuromag or MagMind, I believe are the two, or Magtine is the other one. Those are forms of magnesium L-threonate. Again, that form of magnesium should not bother your stomach. It should not have a laxative effect. It actually crosses the blood-brain barrier to really help support increased brain levels of magnesium, which can also enhance synaptic communication and is, you know, beyond the stress benefit. You get a benefit for the brain as well. All right, well, I don't see any other questions. I appreciate all of you attending. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a code for special savings on any of the products that I talked about today. So look for that, and we'll also send you some notes too, in case you want to use those to read back over what we talked about today. So thank you all, and enjoy your evening.